You're listening to the Flickcast, a pop culture podcast about stuff nerds love. I am Chris Ulrich, and with me, of course, Joe Dilworth. Hello, Joe.
Hello, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. I just am excited about this episode. I think this is going to be fun. I like superhero stuff, and as we
Yes.
talked about last week, we got into some superhero stuff, and we know we have things coming up. Although, do you think Loki qualifies as a superhero, or is he more of a supervillain?
He's been both in the comics, so
Interesting.
I guess that's going to be my question before we dive into this is how we're going to define this. So,
Wait, before you do that, I should mention that we are on Patreon.
Oh
at
yes, yes.
at patreon.com/theflickcast. And if you'd like to support the show, we'd appreciate it. And also, we're on socials, and we're on the Flickcast website, of course. And then you can find us at Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher and Google Podcasts and every place you can find podcasts. And if you wouldn't be minding it so much, wow, that's terrible. If you wouldn't mind, it would be great if you could review the show or even give it a rating on Apple Podcasts. We sincerely
Yes, please.
appreciate that. I did that terribly, but you know what I mean.
And thank you for those that have done so. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for those who've come on and rated the show. We're doing well. We're back at 4.9. Woo!
Nice.
There's still that one disgruntled person.
that point one disgruntled person. Yes.
Thanks a lot for ruining it, man. It's
Way
like
to go.
I saw something recently that said that Paddington 2 is now not 100% on Rotten Tomatoes because some dick gave it a negative review from 2017.
I mean, this is why we can't have nice things, right?
Seriously, the world has gone to shit because of the pandemic and everything, and now Paddington 2 is not 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Come on.
Somebody actually hated Paddington 2 and decided to be vocal about it.
And not only did they not like it, but they decided to write an article about it and review it and give it a negative review and on Rotten Tomatoes. So it got 99% approval. It used to be the highest movie on Rotten Tomatoes.
Damn it.
Which
So
is crazy.
close.
So anyway, today's episode, we're going to go a little differently again, and we're going to talk, like we did with sci-fi movies, we're going to talk about superhero movies.
So that's what I want to...
That predate the MCU, right?
Yes, so that's what I want to kind of define. And I know I had said I want it to be superhero movies. What I couldn't remember is, did I say comic book movies pre-MCU or superhero movies pre-MCU? And there's a distinction there.
There is absolutely. I think it could be any kind of superhero movies pre-MCU. I mean, I know that MCU is basically comic book movies, right? But there's definitely a few movies that I've enjoyed that don't have a comic book origin, but still I would consider superhero type movies. So I'm sure we probably have the same picks, but
probably. I mean,
probably
there's some obvious ones, right? I mean,
obvious.
Of course, Superman the movie and Tim Burton's Batman. I mean, those. I'm guessing you have those on your list.
How did you put that? Have you been looking at my list?
I have, because I have it in my head.
That's pretty weird. So yeah, all right. So for the purposes of this episode, we will define it as any superhero type movie pre-MCU. So before or in 2008 or previous to that, because 2008 is when Iron Man came out.
Yes.
So
So pre 2008.
Although some things came out, like Dark Knight came out in 2008.
Sure.
And I would say that's not MCU at all. Obviously, it's DC. But Batman Begins, which is also on my list, was 2005. So that's way before the MCU. Although not before Marvel movies, though, because there were Marvel movies. They just weren't made by Marvel all the time. They were made by Fox or Sony.
The X-Men movies obviously fall into this. The only reason I asked for the distinction is I have some on my list that aren't like, tights and capes superheroes, but are based on comics. But I feel that they kind of fall into this.
So why don't you start?
Okay, so I'm going to say, so I'll say probably, even though I already mentioned, the big two, one of the ones very high on my list, if not at the top of the list, would be The Crow.
The Crow.
And I consider that a superhero movie. It's certainly a movie based on a comic. But yeah, no, I would. I have an unusual amount of affection for The Crow for very personal reasons, and
No, I know you do.
I don't need to go into that here, but that is certainly on my list, and that came out in '94. That's a pre MCU superhero
Was
movie.
that based on other IP, as the kids say?
It was based on an IP. It was based on an existing comic book miniseries, 3 issues that had previously come out. And I think there was that much like anything else that's an adaptation had a long road to being filmed. But yeah, the comic book came out.
Yeah,
before.
I love The Crow. The movie. Brandon Lee was amazing in the movie,
Yeah.
and obviously, it's, we don't have to get into it, but it's a huge tragedy. It was a huge loss.
Yes.
I think he would have gone on to do amazing things.
Absolutely.
More amazing things. And the subsequent Crow movies were not as good, but he had some quality. I thought that because he was tough but vulnerable, like Bruce Lee. I mean, Bruce Lee could beat the shit out of anybody, but he also had humanity, which I think was it was one thing that was interesting about him as a character and as an actor. And Brandon had that too. Even in something like some other movies he did with, like, he did a movie with Dolph Lundgren, which I can't remember.
Showdown in Little Tokyo.
Showdown in Little Tokyo.
Fantastic movie. That's a
there
great
you go.
movie.
He's like he has to make a comment about Dolph Lundgren's penis. I remember that part of it. But anyway, but he was he was good in that. He was like funny and engaging. It's just a bummer.
He had a good
It's
range.
sad.
He had a presence,
Yeah.
and he had an excellent range as an actor. And yeah, it's a terrible loss all around.
Definitely.
But yeah, no, I would say so. My first pick would be The Crow. I just love that movie.
Yeah.
And he is, he kind of fits the definition of a superhero. He has powers. He has the intention of doing good, even if doing good is to, murder the people that murdered him and his girlfriend. But still, he ends
Well,
up
he's still I mean, these are really bad guys.
Yeah,
he was just living his life, man. And then in his weird in his weird goth apartment, and
yes,
there was like a lot of crosses around and shit. It was like very strange. But yeah, and then he just originally gets revenge, but I mean, he kind of, I feel like he would have gone on to fight evil. But yeah, it's an origin story for a superhero character, I'm sure. But I don't think that superheroes necessarily have to be good either, do they?
No, because I mean, Punisher and things like that, anti-heroes, right? So.
Well, they have a code. It's like we talked about this a lot.
Yes,
they have a code. They don't, like, Batman's not. I wouldn't say Batman is just good. Batman still beats the shit out of people and basically is a vigilante. Yet he has a code where he won't kill. And we talked about this on the last episode with the Joker and all that stuff. He won't cross that line.
It's the code. Yes,
it's his code. Yeah, it's his one thing that he won't do. And and people criticized Superman. The Zack Snyder Superman for killing Zod, but you can make the case that was that the right thing to do because Zod was never going to stop, and we've talked about this before too.
Right.
So,
exactly.
But yeah, I would say the Crow absolutely qualifies as a superhero.
Bonus trivia from The Crow that is relevant to today is, as everyone knows, they finished filming scenes with Brandon Lee's character with a stand-in, and then digitally inserted. Brandon's face over him for certain scenes, but that stand-in, that stunt double, if you would, is none other than Mr. Stahelski. I can never pronounce his last name correctly.
Chad Stahelski?
Chad Stahelski, who is the director of the John Wick films. So,
well, look at that.
Yes, nice little trivia there.
He's had quite a bit of. He's had a pretty good career, isn't he? He's doing something else now that's coming out. I don't know what it is. I saw some announcement.
Highlander.
Is he? That's right.
Yeah, he's doing the Highlander reboot with Henry Cavill. So
is Henry Cavill confirmed as the Highlander?
Yes, because Cavill has confirmed it himself. So yeah.
Did he pose with a picture of Highlander? He said, "Highlander, bitches." Wait, no.
Yeah, he basically was like.
Sorry, that was a callback to last week's episode. I apologize.
Yeah, he was like, "Yeah, I'm honored to be taking on this role and blah 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 and all this stuff." So,
he's gonna be fucking awesome as a Highlander, dude.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, that completely elevates. To me, it elevates the movie and.
Yeah, that's what I love about Cavill. You can say whatever you want about his personal life because there's some rumors of him being like a ladies' man or whatever, and that might be true. I don't know, but he's also a giant nerd.
Yeah, I mean he did videos. He's done videos of building a gaming computer. I mean,
he's a freaking nerd. He knows more about The Witcher than most people.
Right?
It's like, he knows more about that guy. I'm sure he could tell you stuff about the Highlander you probably don't know. Which is
I'm sure.
Hard to believe, because you're like a Highlander expert. So
yeah, I'm sure he could. So I think that's stellar casting, and
Yeah, it's gonna be cool.
And Stahelski is fantastic for directing that. So anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy the. John Wick is an interesting character. I mean, could you make the case that John Wick is a superhero in a way because
absolutely.
he has an origin story, right? He becomes this vengeful, wrathful king thing because they killed his dog.
Yep.
Don't fuck with the guy's dog, man.
He seems to be fairly invulnerable too.
He does seem to. Well, he's got that beautiful suit, which also has Teflon or whatever.
He fell off a roof and survived. I mean,
well, he does seem fairly invulnerable. That's true.
And he kind of bonked the fire escapes on the way down. Like, holy crap! So yeah.
Well, yeah, he does. Yeah, you're right. So maybe he's kind of invulnerable. Maybe he's kind of a superhero or an anti-hero, I guess, because you do, root for him, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And and he's done a lot of bad shit, and he gave it up for love, and then
Baba Yaga, yes,
right. So he's not exactly a great guy. So he spends. The thing that I always wondered about the John Wick movies, and then we'll get back to superheroes in a second. But I've always wondered about John Wick is that at some point, can there be redemption for John Wick, and what will he do to achieve it? Because right now it doesn't seem like that's possible. What is his redemption? Is this a redemption story? Even I don't know. But we don't have to talk about that right now. But I was always curious about that.
I think we can talk about that later. We should do a deep dive into John Wick movies.
Okay, let's do that. And Chad Stahelski.
Absolutely. So, what's your first pick for superhero movie?
My first pick is also a non sort of traditional superhero film, which does not come from existing comic books, but also heavily features existing comic books. I'm talking about, of course, 2000's Unbreakable.
Ah, yes. Excellent choice.
M. Night Shyamalan. Thank you. God damn.
Wow.
I'm having trouble with English today. That is definitely a superhero film. Bruce Willis becomes or was born with powers and just finally develops them. And his one, of course, Achilles heel is water, which I find interesting. But yeah, he's a superhero who learns to. He's got interesting powers though. He's got super strength, right? But also he can like brush past people and see that they're going to do bad shit.
Yes. Yep.
Which I think is those kind of things don't go together necessarily. But yeah, I was a huge Unbreakable fan when it came out in 2000, and I thought it was cool, and I still think it's cool to this day because I'm a huge comic book nerd.
Well, it still holds up too. I've watched it recently.
It does. It does. Well, I watched it. Yeah, I watched the whole trilogy.
Yes.
Now, and I'm so glad that he got to do the trilogy. I thought that.
Yeah, I thought it worked. I thought they all worked well. Even Glass.
Yeah.
People are just like, "Oh, that was terrible." I'm like, but as part of the trilogy, I think it works great. So.
Yeah, and of course, any movie with Samuel Jackson is also going to be cool. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. But, he's a real life superhero. So
he really is. I think it's great that he came back to play Glass Man one more time.
Yeah, no, that was cool. And,
he didn't have to do that, probably.
Nope, not at all.
But yeah, so Unbreakable is mine. I just love I love the setup. It's like you're the only person to survive this train crash. There's not a mark on you, man. What the hell?
Well,
and he slowly discovers his powers, and his son is like, oh my god, my dad's a superhero, and then he continues through the movies too, which I thought was cool. So anyway,
well, I thought they marketed it well because it didn't occur to me till I was watching the movie and maybe like a third or halfway through the movie, going, "Oh wait, this is a superhero origin." I didn't get that because Shyamalan. I figured, it's going to be some horror element or something like that because he was fairly new on the scene at the time, and it's like I was waiting for the aliens or the monsters or whatever to show up, and of course there are monsters in the movie, but they're people. But yeah,
human monsters.
It was a excuse me, I can't talk today. It was a huge joy to me to be watching the movie in the theater, and as I'm watching it, realizing this is a superhero origin movie. This is awesome.
Yeah, I had that same revelation or realization watching it, and I was like, all right, that is awesome. Well, it's kind of hard to not figure that out at some point because they turn to Samuel Jackson's character who runs a comic book store.
Right.
I'm the nemesis. I'm the bad guy. It's like, oh, you're the bad guy,
Yeah.
So it's and there's some parts of that movie that are like terrible when the kid's on the thing and he's like his little bones are breaking.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Oh, God,
it's like,
terrible.
wow. It was good and refreshing because it gives you it gave equal insight into the origin of the good guy, but also the bad guy, and it was like, oh, I can see why. Again, the best villains are the heroes in their own story, right? And he totally was like, in his mind, justified for what he was doing because he had to make the best. He had to make a superhero basically because the world needed a hero, and he needed to make one. So in order to do that, he had to be the bad guy. So this when he was a kid and his bones always breaking and stuff, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, it was not the best. That was scary, but yeah. And what had really come out? What kind of other movies were around in 2000? Not too
X-Men.
many. Yeah, X-Men came out.
Movie came out then. But,
that came out in the same year, right?
yeah, but that was like the opposite, and that was like the big sensational superhero movie, right? That was not a subtle...
That's also on my list, but it definitely was pre MCU because it's it was Fox, and I thought they did a really good job. I mean, Bryan Singer also turned out to be a piece of shit too, strangely enough, but the movie is great. I think it really sticks to the comic book origins of everybody, and we got introduced to so many great characters. I mean, in particular, Logan, right? In particular, Wolverine, Hugh Jackman. But I thought everybody was really well cast in the movie, and I thought that, and I still do. It still holds up. I mean, obviously it's dated a little bit, but for the most part, everybody did a great job, and I think Singer did a great job as the director too. It just was a fine film.
Yes.
And look at all the stuff that Hugh Jackman's gotten to do with Logan up to recently, up to making Logan. Strangely enough.
I'm pretty sure that was probably the first big, like, team superhero movie as well. I mean, it wasn't, up until then, for the most part, we have, like, a Superman movie, a Batman movie, a, whoever movie, but,
usually it was like the Batman versus 6 villains or something, right?
Yeah.
It was not, there was no team up. I mean, animated shows, like there was the Super Friends show, and there was all these other TV shows.
Oh, sure, the animated
stuff, back in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. It was the first sort of, this is a team of mutants who go off and do shit.
Yeah.
And do whatever. And so, I think you're right. So
that was really exciting. Yeah, and we can talk about that because that's on my list too.
Okay.
X-Men was it was like the first teen movie, but the first X-Men movie. And I mean, I guess there was X-Men, the animated series and stuff like that before, but just seeing that in live action, characters that from a comic book series that majorly impacted me as a young person when I read it, because I started reading just before the whole Dark Phoenix saga, and so the fact that not only did a main superhero character turn evil, and obviously that's happened in comics before because it's a trope, but it's the first time I'd really encountered it, that this is like a main character and she's gone evil, and she not only has she destroyed a whole planet full of people, but now she's going to kill all our main characters, and at the last minute decides that she's not going to do that and decides to kill herself to prevent anything else from happening. And it's like, whoa, that just blew my mind as a kid. So to see the beginnings of, it wasn't necessarily, they didn't start the Dark Phoenix storyline in X-Men, but X-Men had a huge impact on me. So seeing them live action in a movie for the first time was like, wow, this is great.
I thought the effects were really cool too.
Yeah.
And all that, seeing them all run around. I was not as big an X-Men fan as I was like Captain America and the Falcon and all those characters. But yeah, seeing it was great. And I got on. I mean, the moment that you see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, you're like, yep, that's him. It's like when I saw when you see Robert Downey Jr., it's like, yep, that's Tony Stark. And you see Hugh Jackman, you go, yep, that's Wolverine. No problem believing that.
No, and like everyone is like, oh, he can't play Wolverine. And I it's the same thing like recently with Henry Cavill being cast as Connor McLeod for Highlander reboot.
Connor McLeod.
That doesn't fit. And I'm like, these people are actors, right? Their job is to believably play a character, right? They're not,
Yeah, it's his job. He
know,
handles a sword just fine. Have you not watched Witcher? I'm just
right. And he's not. I mean, if you talk to Henry Cavill, outside of that, he's completely different. They're actors at what they do. So anybody saying, "Oh, that person is completely off base to play that character," I'm like, well, why don't you wait and see first before you say that, right? So
exactly. Well, who? I mean, speaking of the Highlander, I know we can go back to
sure.
other thing in a second. Who will play the Kurgan? And who will play Ramirez if there's a Ramirez character? But I want to see who's going to play the Clancy Brown Kurgan in the movie. Who do you think that's going
I've
to
played this game a bunch
be?
recently.
I bet you have.
But I would say, you know,
I mean, Clancy Brown's still around. He could play it again, maybe.
that would be cool. The favorite for right now for Ramirez is Antonio Banderas. Which
You think so?
yeah, I'd be a fan of that. I'd be.
I think they're going to go younger. I think it's Diego. I think it's going to be Diego Luna.
Well, here's the funny thing: is everyone is like, "Oh, it's got to be an older person." I'm like, "They're immortals. It doesn't have to be an older person." The one that I saw that I think would be brilliant is Rami Malek from Mr. Robot.
Oh yeah.
I'd be totally in favor of that. I think that would be great. Now,
I was just thinking because his name is Ramirez that he should be played by a Latino. So I'm not, because Sean Connery, although amazing, is not Latino.
No.
So that's why I thought Diego Luna, because he's kind of hot right now.
Or actually, I take this back. Maybe people were picking Rami Malek for Kurgan, which would be an interesting choice.
Yeah, that I can see. But I always feel like Kurgan is like physically imposing.
Yeah, but I don't think
Rami Malek
has to be. I don't know.
I mean, I guess. I don't know. I don't think Rami Malek's going to want to play a bad guy every time, though. But maybe.
No, and I don't think Henry Cavill is quite as tall as people think he is. I think he's shot tall, but.
You think he's shot tall? He's wearing lifts in his boots.
Is he? I mean, is he even 6 feet?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
I have no idea. Is any actor even 6 feet?
Let's be honest. Yeah, really. So, yeah, no, I would be interested in like a. Yeah, I think if he's playing a Egyptian type character. Although, I know. So you watched the show Legion, right?
Sure, yeah.
The dude that played the bad guy in that, I think, would be brilliant as Ramirez because he's a really good actor.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and he is of Egyptian
You mean
descent.
Aubrey Plaza?
Yes, that would be fun. She could play Kurgan.
I'd be fine with that. Yeah, see, I think they should mix it up. I would have no problem with them gender swapping the Kurgan.
No, not at all.
I think Aubrey Plaza would be great as a bad guy in that movie.
So on my other podcast, we did a fan casting for the reboot a long time ago, and I kind of went the whole, and we did our own pitches for it. And my whole thing was, why not make McLeod, the Highlander, the main character, female? I had a whole thing pitched for that I think would have been fine, but that probably would have been a bridge too far for.
Well, the other thing, the problem with that is there were no. I mean, the Highlanders in Scotland were men. Basically, they'd go off and fight. The women wouldn't fight.
Well, it doesn't.
So if you're talking about historical, sort of perspective, is like he's the Scottish warrior who turns out to be immortal, right? Who realizes that he's immortal. At least I'm going by the movie. It's like
sure,
so he wouldn't be out there. He wouldn't be out there fighting and figure out that.
But I would have flipped that on its side where. He was in a battle, he was almost killed and survived and was banished. And, he goes off, like in the original movie, marries Heather. And then it turns out in my pitch that it's Heather who's the immortal and not him. And, the Kurgan shows up and kills him and she takes off and she becomes immortal. So, anyway.
Well, that's interesting, except that
she has to learn how to... be a warrior over the years and stuff like that.
Right, but the first few minutes of your movie has to be pretty fast then, because you can't have this whole character get developed. And by the way, this is the actual protagonist, and switch over to something.
It would be like here's the expectation part where the movie starts off even pre-credits with that, and then you go on with the movie. So
I don't know. Do you think that would backfire? Do you think people would not like that?
I think a lot of people would hate it.
Well, for other reasons besides the fact that you're gender swapping the Highlander, but also because. It's like a misdirect that's not necessary. You're trying to be too clever, maybe, like with Pietro in the Scarlet Witch show. It's like
it kind of goes to my whole thing of if you're
his name is Boner. Her name could be Heather Boner. Right?
Yeah, exactly. If you're going to remake something or reboot it, do something different with it. Don't be like, was it Singer that did the shot-for-shot remake of Psycho?
No, that was Gus Van Sant, I think.
Oh, right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a nice experiment, but you should bring something new to the story and do something different with it, in my opinion. But I think Henry Cavill will be totally fine.
It's
And I'm
crazy
interested
to
to see
think that
who else they cast. But
the original Highlander movie only cost about $20 million.
right.
That's probably what Henry Cavill's getting to play the Highlander.
So back to superhero movies. What's your
I'm sorry.
next
Yeah,
pick?
back to superhero movies. I apologize. My next pick is actually a movie that is in the MCU technically, but I think that, I mean, obviously the MCU didn't exist back then as we know it now, but I think that if this movie hadn't been successful, other things might not have happened. I'm speaking, of course, about Blade.
Yes. Okay. I had a feeling that's where you were heading with that. So
Yeah, Blade is I thought was awesome. I loved it, and I thought that that Wesley Snipes was perfectly cast
yes.
in the movie, and there was nothing I don't think about Blade the movie that I disliked. I mean, the effects were good, the fights were amazing, he was amazing as the character, and I still think he could play Blade now. Although I think that the guy they've got now is going to be
Yeah.
great too.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no reason why there can't be another Blade, like
Sure.
Blade's brother or something. But yeah, this movie, because it was successful and it featured an African American protagonist, I don't know that you'd have Black Panther for sure necessarily. Although Black Panther came along in the MCU after they'd had a lot of success. So
Sure.
they felt maybe more comfortable to branch out a little bit. And Black Panther, nothing to take away from that, was an exceptional film, I thought.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But there wouldn't be. I think that people started to realize that, hey, these movies can be successful and done well, because Blade, I thought, was really well done and was very successful. And so let's make more of that. But you seem to agree.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, yeah, Blade was a fantastic movie, and I agree. If it hadn't been made, or if it had been terrible, that might have. I don't. Yeah, you're right. I don't think we would have all of the superhero and comic book movies we have today. I mean, yes, Superman the movie was huge before that,
Right.
and the Batman movies to a certain extent. But this really, like you said, showed that these superhero comic book things might actually do something, because it was, who heard of Blade other than comic book readers before that? Nobody. And
Right,
it was
which is
like,
probably why it was cheap to get
Yeah.
and relatively cheap to make. I can't imagine the budget was too big. I mean, it was, how much could it have been? It was 1998, so how long
Right.
ago was that, right? So
but it
things,
was well done, and
yeah, it was really well done. And unfortunately, the subsequent movies weren't maybe as good, especially Blade Trinity. But also, poor Wesley Snipes started to believe the hype a little bit.
yeah.
But that happens, but that does not take away from Blade being a really solid story and a great cast. Stephen Dorff was awesome. Chris Christopherson
Yeah.
was great. I mean, there's nobody really bad in it. And it's just it's one of those things that you talk about cult films. It definitely turned out to be kind of a cult film, I think. But also sort of a mainstream hit. But you're right. Who had heard of Blade as a character except comic book people, and who was interested in this kind of thing? Obviously, a lot of people were,
Yes.
and so they went to see it. So I'm happy that it came out, and I'm happy that they got a few sequels, and obviously, it was nice that it helped spawn this whole superhero movie. I don't want to say renaissance, but like this whole crop of superhero. If you even like superhero movies, some people don't.
Sure.
But I do. But
I think it lit the fire to what we have today. So
yeah, it definitely did.
Yep.
I'd like to see the Blade like first cut. Apparently, there's like a director's cut of Blade that was originally out. There's 140 minutes or something like that. It's really
that would
long.
be cool. Yeah.
So I'd like to see that. But anyway,
Yeah.
so that's
Excellent
my
pick.
next pick. Yeah, thank
That's
you.
on my list as well. So
What about you, man?
all right, so my next pick is a very fondly remembered movie that I think still holds up, that maybe not a lot of people saw or remember, The Rocketeer.
Yeah, there you go.
The Rocketeer is just a great movie. The comic book is a lot of fun, but it's a period movie in the 1930s, which in real life 1938 was kind of the Renaissance, or not Renaissance, but the beginning of superheroes in comics, essentially. But this the character Rocketeer is from the 80s, but it was written as taking place in the 1930s. Again, it was another one that I thought had a lot of inspired casting. A lot of people in it that have gone on to be very successful and have done other things. But it's just
Billy Campbell is not blown up as much as he might have thought he was going
I
to.
know, and I'm kind of disappointed by that because I think he's a really good actor. Jennifer Connelly, though, some people may have seen her in a few things, and
She did okay. Yeah, Timothy Dalton too.
Yep, Terry O'Quinn, Alan Arkin, just a ton of people. It's a very fun movie. It's certainly not a dark movie. It's lighthearted. Action adventure, but Joe Johnston, who makes solid movies, directed it. I really liked it. In fact, I think the screenplay is from the guys who ended up writing one or two of the Tim Burton Batman movies. But
What?
Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, did they do some Batman
I don't
stuff?
know.
Or they did something. No, The Flash. They did the original Flash 1990
They did something.
TV series. That's right. But yeah, no, The Rocketeer is a lot of fun. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a really good kind of popcorn action adventure movie.
Yeah, I need to go back and revisit that. I remember watching it in the theater and not being totally blown away. I don't know why. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I wasn't in the mood for light fare.
Right.
Because it is more light and it's more
absolutely.
positive and
Yes.
and stuff like that. And I think it made money too. I wonder why they didn't. Oh no, I guess it didn't make any.
No,
money.
it didn't do so well. I mean, they've like there's been rumblings, much like anything else over the years, of we should do another Rocketeer, but nothing's ever happened.
They can reboot it, I guess, if they need to.
I think Billy Campbell's available. I mean, he could.
I don't think Jennifer Connelly is though, but maybe she is.
Well, that I don't know. We won't know until the next season of Snowpiercer. But
Snowpiercer. Well, she'll just fit that in during the
the break,
during the hiatus from Snowpiercer.
Yes.
So I'm not watching the Snowpiercer show. I gotta be honest.
Okay, well, we'll discuss that later. But
The movie was fine. I don't need it. I don't need more from that. But okay, so my next one is I guess you could say it's also a comic book movie in a way, but it did come before the MCU. But it does feature a character that we talked about last week, but not the exact character. I'm talking about Constantine, the 2005 version with Keanu Reeves. It does feature one of our favorite actresses, Tilda Swinton, also.
yes, it does.
But yeah, I love Constantine. Jesus, sorry. I know it kind of got a bad rap, and maybe it wasn't as successful as it could have been, but I thought it was cool. It visually was cool. Francis Lawrence, I thought, did a great job as a director. Keanu Reeves was terrific. It for some reason that's the kind of movies I liked at the time, and I still kind of rewatch it because it's kind of dark and funky and weird, but it's got magic and weird stuff, all that kind of weird stuff going on. But I dug it, and I think that character is an interesting character. Obviously, they didn't explore Constantine as a character as deeply as they do in the comics, or I'm sure they will. Like in the Constantine series, they did a little bit.
Yes,
but I'm sure they will in Sandman. Although Sandman is not, it's not the same character. Obviously, it's his great grandfather or great grandmother, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, I will. It's one of those movies where if it's on, I'll start watching it because Tilda Swinton is great as in her role, and then Lucifer is also super cool. I'm trying to remember the actor who plays that character. I'm going to look it up because I want to.
Peter Stormare, who's
Peter Stormare. Thank you.
Creepy in everything he plays.
Yeah, that's who it was. Thank you.
Yes. No, you know what? I have a huge amount of affection for the Constantine film. I know, there was a lot of a fan outcry because in the comics, John Constantine is British, and a lot of the personality of the character and the stories the characters involved in are very much entrenched in England and British history and things like that. But you know what? I didn't have a problem with that because I thought that Keanu Reeves did a great job of basically having the essence of the character. And it was just a damn fine movie. Again, another one that was well cast.
Yeah.
There's a ton of really great actors in it, but it's just a really, really dark, almost horror movie, which to me, that should be what a Constantine movie or story is about. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the series. I think Matt Ryan is fantastic as Constantine. He's obviously strayed far from his horror roots being on Legends of Tomorrow on TV, but still a great character. But this was like a really, really well done Constantine story, and I think Keanu Reeves did a great job. So,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I liked it a lot too. Keanu Reeves, Rachel Weisz, Shia, even young Shia LaBeouf,
yes.
Tilda Swinton.
And this is another one that they've talked about for years about doing a sequel to, even as far back as recently as last fall in November. Peter Stormare was talking about that they're definitely still working on a sequel. So I would watch another one of those.
It made money. I mean, it only cost what, 70 or 80 million to make or whatever, and then it made 250 worldwide. So I mean, it made money. It was successful. I feel like it's just not successful. It wasn't maybe successful enough, but it's also a hard sell, maybe for people.
Well, I mean, and I think over the years,
Keanu Reeves is busy doing John Wick movies. So.
I mean, over the years when they've looked at making another one, there's been, the rights to the character have been tied up in other things like the TV series. Guillermo del Toro was going to make a Justice League Dark film for a while that featured John Constantine, and now he's obviously on the CW superhero shows. So I don't know again how you untangle that knot, but Peter Stormare seems fairly convinced that they're going to be able to make a sequel soon.
Well, you made a good point, though. It's like people were upset about Keanu Reeves' character, but the reason the movie got made was the fact that Keanu Reeves wanted to be in it.
Right, exactly.
So that's how movies work, kids. If you have to have an actor that's big enough to because this is maybe a hard sell to the suits at whatever studio. It's like, he's an occult detective who sends demons back to hell. And he's also, bisexual. He's also this weird smoking guy all the time. It's like, oh, no, I can't do that stuff. That's too weird.
Right.
Keanu Reeves wants to be in it? Okay, cool. Green light.
Yeah, well, and part of the development at one point, Nick Cage was going to star in it, which would have been a completely different movie.
I would totally watch that. Nick Cage as Constantine.
That would be fantastic. Here's the thing. I mean, everyone talks about Nick Cage and his, erratic
Nick Cage-isms.
And stuff, but he also is really good about playing introspective characters and quiet characters. I don't know that I think people have forgotten that, but
he's a really good actor, Nick Cage.
Yeah,
I mean,
he isn't just like flailing all the time and talking like this. He's, he is a really good actor. He has range. So yeah, I would watch a Nick Cage, John Constantine film.
I would too, but I'd also watch Constantine 2 with Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so please make that.
Please make that happen. All right. So what's your next one?
I guess this one is a superhero movie. This is more of a comic book movie based on a comic book, and that is Tank Girl.
Oh, sure, Tank Girl. Yeah,
I love Tank Girl, and it actually still holds up. It's kind of a crazy, weird movie. I don't know really how to define it because the comic book character is kind of abrasive and crazy and offbeat, and I thought that the movie translated that well. I thought Lori Petty did a fantastic job playing. Ice-T is in the movie too, which is great.
Come on, Ice-T.
Actually, another, Naomi Watts and Malcolm McDowell. It's another one of
Malcolm
those
McDowell, yeah.
small movies that everyone's forgotten about that has a stellar cast. And it's just, I don't know. I fully admit it's probably one of those movies that I watched at just the right time, and it just struck a chord with me, and I have a large amount of affection for it. But I really like it. I watched it recently, and still, it was a lot of fun. Rachel Talalay directed it, and she's directing a lot of TV right now. Doctor Who, a lot of mainstream shows, cop shows and stuff like that. She's just a great director. I just like the choices she makes and the shots she sets up, and it was a fun movie. If you want something to really just, to be joyful about movies and to watch something that doesn't really necessarily go the way you expect and that is kind of off the wall, Tank Girl is for you. It's a great movie.
Yeah, I always wonder about actresses like Lori Petty. I mean, seemed like she was going to blow the fuck up, right? Because, I mean, League of Their Own, Point Break, Tank Girl.
Right.
Although Tank Girl did not make money at all. It was a huge failure. But it looked like she was going to just explode and be huge and then sort of almost disappeared in a way. And there's I think there's a few cases where that happens, and I wonder, what happened to her. And I wonder if it's something that has to do with, that happened to a lot of actresses. Unfortunately, they had a lot of problems with producers and stuff like that, and she just got out of it for that reason. But I know she's been working. She's just been doing voiceover and stuff, and she was also in Orange is the New Black. I know.
Well, you know that women actors also face that unfortunate thing where they get to be a certain age and no one wants to cast them in anything, which is stupid. That's true. Because Lori Petty, I mean, Free Willy was a huge movie, right? She was in that, so she's a great actor, and again, you're right. She's someone that I wonder
if Tank Girl failing tanked her career. I hate to say it that way, but
maybe, I don't know.
It's hard to say. But
she's been in a few things recently. She's one of those that anytime I see her in anything, I'm like, oh man, she should be in more things. So so Tank Girl, go see it, support it, and
I don't remember loving it at the time, but I've since developed a lot more respect for it. I mean, not respect, but it's one of those cute kind of cult films that grows on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think in 1995 when it came out I was prepared for. I mean, I went and saw it in the theater as I do most things.
Right.
But I don't know that I was prepared to accept it and to enjoy it. But now I kind of like it. I think it's quirky, and the quirky gets to me more, and it appeals to me more than it used to, I guess.
I think it's one of those that you see it advertised, or you come across it and you're like, oh, I should check that out. Is that as bad as I remember? And then when you watch it, it's like, no, this is even better than I remember. And I remember liking it a lot at the time. And now I'm seeing more in it than was there. So
sometimes you watch something and you wonder if it's still as bad as you thought it was. And it's actually worse, too.
Well, that's true. But, yes. Not in this case, though. Tank Girl is great.
Not in this case. Yeah, exactly. So I just have a few more sort of, I guess you could say, generic picks, but one of the movies that I fell in love with as a kid that sort of introduced me to superhero movies was the original Richard Donner Superman.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Superman, the movie.
Yes.
Which, it's not my favorite, oddly enough, it's not my favorite Superman movie of the Donner era, which that would be Superman 2, of course.
Yes, of course.
But, which is, if you watch it today, is still a fantastic movie, and Christopher Reeve is a fucking brilliant actor, especially, and we've talked about this before, you and I, especially the scene in the Niagara Falls Hotel when he's just for that one moment, he's going to say, I'm Superman.
Right.
And then he just puts the glasses back on. He's like, nope, I'm not, it's like, that is brilliant.
Yes.
And that Superman, the movie though, is I saw that in the theater and I was blown away. I'm like, you will believe a man can fly. And I did. And I totally bought it. I mean, I was a kid at the time, and so I'm sure that was the right time for that kind of thing. But man, I just remember being amazed. Although I thought the credits lasted too long.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, at the beginning, yes.
Yeah, they're like flying over your head. I'm like, okay,
Like,
that's enough
God,
credits.
can we get to the movie? Yeah.
And then what happens? It's like a giant like dome, and like Marlon Brando, you're sent
It's
to
like,
the Phantom
what?
Zone. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Like, got to get Brando, his $5 million worth of screen time.
Yes.
But
$5
I'm
million
like, wow.
per minute. Yeah.
Or something, yeah. But it was Brando, man. He was powerful. That's freaking Jor-El, man.
Well,
you totally believe it. But
it was
anyway.
the first. It was the first like superhero movie. There have been superhero movies before that, mostly on TV.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was the first superhero movie that serious money was put into.
Right.
And I think
they took it seriously. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there was, obviously at the end he does a little wink to the camera as he's flying and stuff like that, and there's humor in it. But you're right, they took it. What would it be like if Superman actually came to Earth? How would that work? And the other thing too, because it came out in 78. Watching that movie again is like all the all the special effects and everything they did with that movie without computers. It was just like, wow, they really did. I mein, all of the flying was crane stuff.
Yeah, it was wires and green screen. Is like optical printing back in the day. I mean, because it was only a couple years after Star Wars.
Yeah.
So
they just did a fantastic job with that movie, and it's you're right. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's my all-time favorite superhero movie, but as an achievement and as a movie, and even a Superman movie, it's just phenomenal.
Well,
what they pulled off and how well it was.
You're right, though. It's like, I feel like it was the first time people said, let's make a serious take on Superman. Let's make a serious, not adult version of Superman, but like for kids, but also for grown-ups too, because it's a romance, and there's drama and there's action, like the whole helicopter scene with Lois falling off the roof. I mean, there's definitely tension and stuff like that. And this guy flies up and grabs the helicopter and catches her.
Yeah, I mean, so
and I'm like, this is granted, sometimes it was probably like, well, we can't really do the effects, and maybe they didn't even know if they could do the effects back then, but they still managed to pull it off, and it still holds up. But nothing, I think, makes it better and more. You can believe it because you can believe Christopher Reeve.
Yes.
He's taking it seriously. He sells it. I'm Superman. I'm also Clark Kent. He sells it completely. Yeah. And, it may be a campy sort of movie, but the characters are taking it seriously. Yeah. They're not going, oh, this is stupid. And he totally bought into it, and you can tell. And he was doing his best job, and they all did. And it was very well directed, and it was very well photographed. It's a beautiful looking film if you watch it.
Yep.
And it just, it ushered in, I think, the modern sort of, hey, we can make serious superhero films, and they'll make money because it made a fuck ton of money.
It's kind of to me, it exists too in an interesting place because, like like we've said, it kind of was the beginning of, hey, superhero movies can be taken seriously, and we can put money into them, and they'll make us money. But it also came kind of at the tail end of making epic movies. Because movies aren't made like that anymore, and they weren't made like that very soon. Even Superman 2 is not epic in scope like Superman the movie was. I mean, maybe the Donner cut kind of is because they filmed them at the same time, but it's still got this, I mean, so these panorama shots at the farm and stuff like that, and they eventually have finally released the 3-hour version of the movie. That used to be the thing, epic movies back in the day. You got a certain version, like a 2.5 hour version in the theater, and then when it came out on TV, it was like the uncut version, and it was like, sometimes it was over 2 nights because it was so long.
Well, they had to have 200 hours of commercials too.
Right. So the same thing with Superman the movie. That was like one of the last movies that, when it came out on TV, there was the scenes you've never seen before, the unedited version, and it was the 3-hour version. They finally released that on Blu-ray, but it's just this epic story, an epic movie, and just I don't know, it's fantastic and well done.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about
shot. So.
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting about this movie is that it's such an optimistic and positive story, because as we know about movies in the 70s, they were very sort of anti-establishment and very sort of, you know, stick it to the man because of Watergate and Vietnam and all this other stuff that was going on politically in the world at the time. So the movies in the 70s are particularly cynical. You can
Yes.
go back and look at a lot of movies and find the cynicism. Superman is not cynical.
Right.
Superman, you know, truth, justice, and the American way kind of thing. It's like, you know, and I think it's interesting that it was so successful. It came out right at the tail end of the 70s. I mean, you could make the case that Star Wars was kind of like that too. It's sort of like it was an optimistic version of the future, although not that optimistic because the future was sort of dirty and grungy. But
Right.
there's still people who are heroic. Because what
Yes.
happens at the end of Star Wars, they get medals, right? So they're heroes. But and
Right.
that's a positive ending. But Superman was like, this guy is going to save lives and save cats out of trees and do all the mom and pop and apple pie shit that you know that he's supposed to do. And it was sort of an antidote in a way, I think, to the cynicism of the 70s. And
Yep.
that's, I think, why it was so successful because people were tired of that and they wanted something uplifting and they wanted something more positive. And it had that kind of message and it resonated. And I think it still resonates. I
Yeah.
mean, we're kind of going through something similar, you know, in the last few years, especially. And, you know, I that's
Well,
why I think popular things are not as cynical. Like, look at something like Ted Lasso. Everyone loves that show because it's such an uplifting, positive show, and people want that now. And I think
right.
Superman, the movie, fulfilled that same thing back in the day. So,
Well, and I know you said that it, and it's true that it hinged on the believability of Christopher Reeve. But again, they also, packed it full of, I guess maybe to give it more legitimacy, but they packed it with like, Marlon Brando, Glenn Ford, Jackie Cooper, Terrence Stamp was pretty unknown at the time, but actors like that are like, listen, we're gonna
Gene
put these
Hackman.
Gene Hackman, we're gonna put these actors in this movie to let you know that not
This is a
only
serious movie.
yeah, it's a serious movie, and we're not just it's not just some campy thing that you've seen on TV before. No, we're being serious about this, and and
No, I think you're right. I
Richard
mean,
Donner directing it for crying out loud. So
Christopher Reeve was an unknown, basically. So
yeah, yeah,
they had to put other people in. I mean, Brando legitimized the movie. Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor totally legitimized the movie. I mean, these
yeah,
guys are powerhouse actors, and if they're in it, it must be good. It
right.
must be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Christopher Reeve,
It's like, who's that guy?
was nobody at the time, unfortunately. And he doesn't even get top billing, I don't think, in the first movie. But it's like, but again, it's a Superman movie, so the idea is that if he wasn't believable and wasn't sort of this linchpin of goodness, and then the whole thing would have fallen apart, even with the people around it.
Yeah,
But it works as an ensemble too because Hackman is so good as Lex Luthor, and you still have the sort of campiness with Otis, with Ned Beatty's character, still
yeah,
sort of being funny, and Hackman screaming "Mr. Smoker," all
yeah,
that stuff, which is hilarious. But he's still dangerous. You just feel
yeah,
like Lex could
yeah.
just look at you and fucking kill you for no reason
Exactly.
because but he tolerates these buffoons around him because also it makes him feel smarter, I think too. But
True. Well,
yeah,
that,
it's
and,
such a great movie. So
and then you have the story. The story for the movie comes from Mario Puzo, who wrote The Godfather.
yeah,
So it's like,
yeah,
I mean, and like I said, Richard Donner directing. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of signifiers of this is being taken seriously, but also on the other end of that, turns out it makes it such a higher level movie. So it makes it an
it
epic
does. Yeah,
movie.
everybody was working at the top of their game,
Yes.
and it became this whole thing. And I still think. I mean, you ask somebody like Bryan Singer, or you'd ask Zack Snyder. I think that they're still paying respects to Superman the movie to this day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Even with Superman Returns, Singer with doing that, it's like
Oh
basically
yeah.
it's a sequel to Superman 2,
Yep.
and and it kind of is, and you can't forget that kind of thing. And there's always been stepping stones to the sort of modern superhero movies, but they definitely owe a debt to these ones that came before, for sure.
Well, much like Superman, kicked off the whole superhero thing in the comics.
Right.
Superman the movie kind of kicked off the whole modern superhero thing.
The Ubermensch. So
Yes.
we got time for you got time for maybe one more. I mean, I have more on my list,
I
but we can
could
just
keep going.
I could do this all day.
Gee, which one to pick then? I don't know. You pick something, and I'll whittle down.
Well,
my
I'll
list.
just read the other ones I have. I mean, I have the original Batman, Tim Burton's Batman, and which is a great movie. Although I think Batman 2 is probably better. But the Dark Knight, the original Dark Knight, and then Batman Begins actually in 2005, which also sort of made this idea that superhero movies could be darker and more. People say, oh, Christopher Nolan made the DCU much darker and much more of a bummer. But I kind of think it made it more realistic because Batman living in modern day, Gotham's, aka Chicago, grounded the story more because Batman is a boots on the ground kind of character, right? He's out there punching faces in an alley somewhere. So that totally works for Batman. Whether it worked for Superman, I don't know. But it worked definitely for Batman. So I've got that. And then one of the best, I think the best Sam Raimi Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In 2004. I mean, a great movie. Let's be honest. Tobey Maguire working as his best Superman, as his best Spider-Man. I keep saying Superman, and his best Peter Parker, Doc Ock. Freaking, it's a great movie.
Yes.
And also, let's not forget Hellboy in
I was
Guillermo del
going
Toro.
to say Hellboy. Yeah.
Yeah, Hellboy, a great movie. People, I think, don't give it enough credit.
I agree with that. Yeah.
For being good. Ron Perlman, amazing as Hellboy. I don't think there's been obviously nothing, no disrespect to the new Hellboy movie, but I think that to David Harbour, but I think that it's hard to beat Ron Perlman as Hellboy. It really is.
Absolutely.
It's a great movie, and Del Toro obviously loves the material and loves the character, and so I think it's one of those things. It's like another cult movie in a way. I know it was successful, but because Hellboy 2, which I didn't like as much, but
still really good.
You can't forget the original Hellboy. So, but that's kind of the ones that I was going for. I mean, they're kind of obvious picks in a way, but
I would
they're sort of pivotal movies I think that help get us to the modern MCU.
Yeah, I would agree with you on those. Definitely the Raimi Spider-Man movies. Definitely Hellboy. I would add. Going back a little bit further, the original, not original, but the 1980 Flash Gordon movie, which is so campy, but I just love that movie. That's another one that just has a perfect mix of campiness, soundtrack by Queen, kind of like the first Highlander movie.
My man Sam Jones.
Yep, and some great acting. Timothy Dalton again, who keeps popping up.
Gotta love Timothy Dalton, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's, everyone raves about
and Brian Blessed.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Oh, I mean, Brian Blessed.
Let's go! I can't do the Brian Blessed voice. He's so good in that. Though.
Yeah,
dive. Yeah, he's awesome.
I would say almost to a lesser extent, but because it's just such a cheesy, campy, fun movie, Toxic Avenger.
I never got into the Toxic Avenger movie.
First one was okay. I know they did a bunch of sequels and stuff that were okay, and that one the original was kind of fun, but it's worth mentioning. Also, Mystery Men, I like that a lot.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, no, I think to wrap it up, that's probably fleshes out the rest of my list. So yeah, for all of you kids that are like, oh, there's never been better superhero movies than the Marvel movies lately, you need to go back and look at some of these because they're really great movies.
We didn't go back that far. No, I mean, there's probably stuff that goes back even farther. But from a technology standpoint and a filmmaking standpoint, it was hard to make stuff. Although they still managed to make Superman TV shows even way back in the day. Although we didn't talk about the Batman TV show with Adam West either.
Oh, well,
which also had a movie.
It did.
It did, but
the Incredible Hulk TV series had TV movies. They did movies.
That's right, the Incredible Hulk. That's right. That was a great show. Bill Bixby as Bruce Banner, or they call him David Banner in the movie the show, right? Because Bruce was too gay.
It's like, really? Okay.
I mean, I hate to say it, but that's the reason.
I know it was, and it was like
he sounded like he was too gay.
So maybe we should do a follow up to this to talk about TV.
Well, I could also talk about the $6 Million Man because that's a superhero story.
So we need to talk about those too. But
the Bionic Woman.
We don't have time today.
We don't have time today, but yeah. But there's a lot of other things. But yeah, it's from a technology standpoint too. It's just George Reeves back in the day in the Superman TV show. He's like jump out the window and land on a mattress.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's flying, people. Can't you tell?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
There's some guy in the back holding his cape and whapping it around so it looks like he's flying. But you know what, though? That's okay. It was like one step above radio. And that's what you had back in the day. And people loved that shit because that to them, it was still cutting edge.
Yep.
It was still amazing. And you wouldn't have those kind of stories today that we have without all that stuff. It all had to be building blocks. That stuff came first and paved the way for other things. But I think to sum up, I don't know that you can, and we've talked about Superman the movie a lot, but I think that was sort of a very pivotal point in the superhero movie sort of genre, whatever you want to call it, because like we said, it took itself seriously, but not too seriously, but the people in the movie took it seriously, and it was very adult, and it was relatable to kids too, but it was grounded in reality, and it was also really well made. Technology was cutting edge, and it was beautifully shot, and music was amazing. And so it was just like, you wouldn't have these things now if it wasn't for something like that being successful and being so good and being a high bar to strive for.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's a lot, but I guess that's it.
I think so. Yes.
All right, so find the Flickcast on Stitcher, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all those other places. Joe and I are on the socials. I'm at Chris U. I'm sorry, at Chris U. Yeah. And he's at What Joe Writes. I was going to say, and I'm at What Joe Writes, but that doesn't make any sense. That would be wrong.
Yes.
And then, of course, if you would be so kind as to go to Apple Podcasts and maybe give the show a review or even a like or even a rating, and rate it highly if you would. That would be nice.
Please.
If you feel so inclined.
We want to get back to a 5-star rating.
We want to get back to a 5-star rating, yeah, because although maybe we don't want to be perfect, maybe that's too much to strive for. But
maybe.
And then, of course, if you'd love to support the show, we would appreciate that if you would go to the Patreon at patreon.com/TheFlickcast and maybe drop a few bucks.
Yes, please.
To continue our endeavors, but we're going to keep on anyway, so it's good either way. Anything else, man?
I think that's it. I think that's good.
I always like to give you a chance to say something at the end because I always like go, okay, and that's the Flickcast, blah, 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 and then I'm done. So I want to make sure that you haven't got anything to say.
I would say the only thing I'll add to that is thanks for listening. I think you take care of it pretty well. So.
All right, well, I'll do it now then. Okay, so for Joe Dilworth, I'm Chris Lawrick. That was the Flickcast. Thanks so much for listening.